Minister, this week we had a large number of TDs in this chamber here who decried efforts made by some British politicians to stop protests in Britain against the horrific war in Gaza. And many of those speakers rightfully said that in no circumstance should the democratic right to protest be prevented, that protest was a foundation stone of a democracy. And for sure, myself as an Irish Republican will always point back to the north of Ireland, when protests were banned in the north of Ireland, and the outcomes that created in terms of the political situation in the north of Ireland. And while many of the protests that are happening outside of certain hospitals, etc., I wouldn't agree with and wouldn't support, I would always support the right to protest, even if I didn't agree with it. In the same way, in the right of freedom of speech, I would always support the right of freedom of speech, even if I don't agree with it. It's actually more important to support those fundamental democratic rights when you don't agree with it. For actually supporting those rights only when they're in sympathy with your own views is not obviously what democracy is about. Now, the Garda Commissioner, when he was asked in relation to what legislation was necessary in terms of providing safe zones, he said actually the legislation as it existed was satisfactory, that it was sufficient. And indeed, I've listened in this chamber of many TDs bringing about reports of protests that were happening outside of certain hospitals that, when they were investigated, were proven not to be true. Indeed, I heard TDs from the government talking about protests that were happening outside some GP locations on certain days when they were happening out on Saturdays, etc. So I would always urge for protests to be always respectful, to be always decent. My worry here is that the foundation stone of a democracy, the right to protest, is going to be deleted in certain areas in relation to this bill. And given the location of some of the providers of abortion in this, it will actually mean significant parts of our city as well. So in some places, it may be right, you might have the right to protest for abortion, but not the right to protest against abortion. In some cases, a mother might be able to say to her daughter that, you should be able to proceed with an abortion in maybe in a cafe in the curtilage of one of these providers, but not be able to give advice against it. We have a situation where 85% of abortions that happen in this state currently are as a result of the socio-economic situation that many people are in. And I know one woman who herself felt that she did not have the economic ability to be able to have her child. And when she was on the way to have an abortion in Britain, she met with a charity who offered her financial support so she could proceed and have her child. She did have her child and she raised her daughter. And now, because of that intervention, she herself is now involved in trying to provide some economic supports to women as they enter abortion clinics in England. There's also this really dystopian situation that's happening in Britain, and I don't know if you saw it, is where individuals are being arrested by police there for silent prayer outside of abortion clinics. Where you have police officers actually asking individuals, what are they thinking? What are they praying about? And if it's those two areas that fit under that legislation, they're being arrested. And there is something very Orwellian in relation to a society that asks citizens in a public space, what are they thinking? What are they praying about in relation to these issues? My own view on this is that this is an enormously difficult situation, there's no doubt. I know many people who disagree with my views on this, and I know that they come from the position of human rights and civil rights as well. But I will say in this, and that any measure of a democracy is how it has tolerance for views that are different to your own or to the establishment views. And I'm very, very concerned that this bill starts to eliminate spaces where people can respectfully and peacefully protest on these issues. The idea that we have a society that now is looking to, in numerous places now, to get rid of public protests, I think is very, very dangerous within society. So the other element that I am fearful about this particular amendment is we have this situation now where people are actually looking for older people who might be standing silently outside of abortion providers to be put in jail. And when you put this beside the idea that right now we have an enormous spike in crime and antisocial behaviour in this country, there's a phenomenal increase in unprovoked vicious attacks in this country. There's a significant increase, a doubling of rapes, sexual assault, of murder in this country. We have a Garda force which is phenomenally limited in terms of its resource. We know that every year for the last 5 years, the number of Gardaí are falling, that recruitment is falling, that morale is falling. And yet, we have a political establishment in here which is looking, I think for ideological reasons, in reality, is looking to push that resource towards getting rid of the rights to freedom of protest. And I think outside of the bubble, outside of the political media bubble, where many people are living in their towns and villages without the safety of Garda resources, they'll be asking themselves, what's actually happening here? And the idea now that we're looking to take further Garda resources to reduce the level of peaceful and respectful protests in this country, I think is wrong. Gur magat.